You brought this on yourself." That's what I heard, her voice, shrill and cutting, while flames roared behind me, swallowing my cabin whole. The heat was unbearable. Smoke stung my eyes. My hands shook as I tried to splash water from a useless garden hose on walls that were already collapsing. And there she stood, Denise. My neighbor. Her arms crossed, her face lit by the fire like some kind of twisted villain in a movie. You should have followed the rules. She screamed across the yard, her voice carrying over the crackle of burning wood. I couldn't believe it. My home, my peaceful retreat in the woods, was being devoured by fire, and my neighbor was treating it like justice had been served. Now, before I get deeper into this, let me pause. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a neighbor feud. It's about corruption, betrayal, and the one thing Karen didn't know about me that would change everything. So if you love insane HOA stories where the truth comes crashing down, hit that subscribe button, smash like, and share this with someone who knows what it's like to deal with a nightmare neighbor. All right, back to that night. I stood helpless, my heart pounding in my chest as my cabin, something I had poured years of sweat and money into, collapsed into glowing rubble. The fire trucks arrived late, crawling down the dirt road like they didn't have a care in the world. By the time the firefighters bothered to roll out their hoses, most of the structure was already gone. And where was Denise? Standing at the edge of her yard, sipping from a mug, smirking as if she was watching a bonfire she planned. Herself? That image? Her smug smile with my life's work burning behind her, burned into my brain harder than the flames themselves, when the fire finally died down and the firefighters packed up. All that was left was smoke, ash, and the shell of my home. They shrugged, muttered something about accidents happen, and drove off into the night. Accident? No. Something deep in my gut told me this was no accident. I walked through the charred remains, coughing, stepping carefully over what used to be my furniture, my books, my photos. That's when I saw it. Near the back porch, half buried in the soot, was a melted red plastic can, the kind used for gasoline. I picked it up with my gloved hand, my stomach turning. The nozzle was cracked, blackened, but still intact enough to know what it was. Somebody had poured fuel here. This wasn't faulty wiring. This wasn't a lightning strike. This was arson. And the way Denise had screamed at me while the cabin burned, the way she looked almost satisfied when the roof caved in, it wasn't hard to put the pieces together. I stood in the ruins of my cabin, gripping that melted gas can, smoke curling into the night sky, rage building inside me. She thought she had won. She thought she could torch my property and scare me off this land, but she didn't know who she was really dealing with. Because this wasn't the first time Denise had come after me. No, this fire was just her boldest move yet. And when I started digging back into the trail of harassment she'd left for months, the citations, the threats, the neighbors she turned against me, I realized this wasn't just a neighbor dispute. It was a war. The fire was the final straw, but the truth is, it had been building for months. When I first moved into that cabin, I thought I'd found peace, a quiet stretch of land on the edge of town, pine trees, fresh air. The kind of place where you could sit on the porch, drink coffee, and hear nothing but the wind. Denise, my neighbor, was the first person to greet me. She walked over the day I unloaded the last moving box. Smile plastered on her face, sunglasses perched on her head, manicured hands stretched out like we were about to be best friends. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she'd said sweetly. "I'm the president of the HOA, so if you need anything, just let me know." At the time, I didn't think much of it. But I should have, because that fake smile was just the opening act. It started small. A note slipped under my door about the condition of my mailbox. Then, a citation for my grass being 2 inches above code. After that, she complained about the solar panels I installed, called them visual pollution. At first, I ignored it. Figured it was harmless busybody nonsense. But Denise wasn't harmless. Every week it was something new. One day it was the color of my curtains. Another, the length of my driveway. She even claimed my porch light was too bright and disrupting the neighborhood aesthetic. And the worst part? The neighbors listened to her. One by one, they stopped waving. They stopped talking. Soon I'd step outside and hear whispers behind closed blinds. Parents would tug their kids inside if I walked down the street. Denise had turned them against me. She was painting me as the outsider, the troublemaker, and when I fought back, it only gave her more ammunition. I tried calling the county clerk about the HOA. They told me what I already suspected. There was no registered HOA in our neighborhood. Nothing on record, which meant every citation she gave me, every fine she threatened, every so-called rule she cited, was fake. She had invented an HOA out of thin air, and somehow everyone went along with it. By the time fall rolled around, I was getting letters stuffed in my mailbox that read like threats. Comply or face consequences. Consequences. I didn't fully understand what she meant until I saw my cabin burn. But looking back, the signs were everywhere. She was escalating, testing boundaries, seeing how far she could push me before I broke. And then, one night, just a week before the fire, I caught her standing in my driveway. No reason, no car. Just standing there in the dark, staring at my house. When I opened the door, she scurried off like she'd been caught. I remember thinking, something's coming. And I was right. After the fire, I stood among the ashes, wondering how I could ever fight this monster of a neighbor alone. But then, help came from the last place I expected. An elderly neighbor, Mr. Peterson, shuffled up to me as the smoke still lingered in the air. He was quiet, a man who mostly kept to himself. But that night, he looked me in the eye with more weight than words alone could carry. "I saw what she did," he whispered, glancing nervously toward Denise's house. "I've seen a lot more than you think. You need to know the truth about her." My heart pounded. "What truth?" He looked over his shoulder again, like even saying it out loud might bring trouble. His voice dropped to almost nothing. "She's not working alone." And with that, Mr. Peterson beckoned me toward his garage, saying he had proof. Proof that what Denise was doing wasn't just harassment. It was a conspiracy. Mr. Peterson's garage smelled like old wood, motor oil, and dust. He shuffled me inside quickly, shutting the door behind us like he was sealing off a crime scene. Stacks of yellowed newspapers leaned against the walls. Rusted tools hung from hooks. In the middle of the chaos, an old wooden workbench stood under a single bulb that buzzed faintly overhead. He motioned for me to sit, his hands trembling slightly as he pulled open a drawer. "I didn't say anything before," he whispered, because I thought maybe she'd stop. But now, he shook his head, his voice cracking. "She's gone too far." From the drawer, he pulled out a stack of manila folders, worn at the edges. He spread them out on the bench like cards in a poker game. Inside each one were photos, notes, even copies of letters. I leaned forward, my pulse hammering in my ears. The first photo stopped me cold. It was my cabin taken weeks before the fire. Red spray paint marked an X across the side. Underneath, in block letters, someone had scrawled, "Next." My stomach dropped. "You knew she was planning this?" Peterson nodded grimly. "She's been holding meetings. Secret ones. Late at night in her garage. A group of them, calling themselves the HOA Council." He slid another photo toward me. Grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Denise standing in her garage with half a dozen neighbors. They weren't chatting over wine. They were pointing at maps, diagrams, stacks of papers. "They've been planning fires," Peterson continued, his voice shaking. "Fake violations. Land grabs. They want to redevelop this entire neighborhood into something new, and they'll squeeze anyone who gets in their way." I stared at the photo, bile rising in my throat. "So the HOA isn't fake?" He gave a bitter laugh. "Oh, it's fake. Just not in the way you think. It's not a registered association. It's a cover, a way for her and her friends to bully the rest of us, to make us think we don't have a choice." I shook my head. "And the fire department?" "They came late." "Barely tried." Peterson's eyes darkened. "That's because her brother's the fire chief." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Suddenly, everything made sense. Why the trucks crawled down the road. Why they didn't fight the flames. Why my cabin was left to burn. "She has friends in city inspection, too," Peterson added, sliding another document across the table. "Every time she files a violation, it goes straight into their system like it's official. They rubber stamp whatever she says. The paper was a fake inspection notice, same logo as the county office, but the signature at the bottom looked sloppy, forged. "How long have you known about this?" I asked, my fists tightening. Peterson sighed, shoulders sagging. "Too long. I thought if I kept quiet, maybe they'd leave me alone. But I've seen her destroy too many people one by one. Your cabin just proved it'll never stop." I pushed the papers back toward him. "Why show me now?" His eyes met mine, heavy with guilt. "Because you're the only one who hasn't backed down. Everyone else either gave in or moved out. And if she keeps going, you won't be the last fire she starts." Silence filled the garage, the weight of his words pressing down like a storm cloud. "She's planning another one," Peterson whispered finally. "I heard her last night. Your cabin was just the start. There's another house marked." My throat tightened. "Whose?" He swallowed, his hand trembling as he pointed at the map on his workbench. The red X was burned into the paper. It wasn't just any house. It was mine. The cabin was gone, but Denise wasn't finished. She wanted my land, my future, my entire life erased. My blood boiled. My hands clenched into fists. This wasn't neighbor drama anymore. This was war. And that's when I realized I couldn't fight her alone. If her brother ran the fire department and her friends ran city inspections, this corruption went deeper than I ever imagined. It was time to call in someone bigger, much bigger. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flames swallowing my cabin. Heard Denise's voice screaming, "You brought this on yourself!" By morning, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a neighbor feud anymore. If her brother was covering for her at the fire department, if inspectors were rubber-stamping her fake violations, this ran deeper than I could touch alone. So I made a call. Not to the sheriff. Not to City Hall, to the FBI. I half expected them to laugh me off the phone. Another homeowner ranting about an HOA gone bad. But when I explained the fire, the fake citations, the brother in the fire department, and the proof Peterson had gathered, the line went quiet. Finally, the agent on the other end spoke. "We've had whispers about organized property schemes in your county, but we've never had a witness. You're saying you have evidence." "I have a witness," I said. "And I have a gasoline can pulled from the ruins of my cabin." That was enough. Within 2 days, 2 agents in plain clothes met me at a diner 20 miles out of town. They didn't flash badges at the table, didn't use names, just slid into the booth like old friends. "You want our help? You have to play along," one said. "Act like you're beaten. Act like you've given up. Meanwhile, we'll be watching," I agreed. What choice did I have? The next week was torture. Denise strutted around the neighborhood like she owned it. She even had the audacity to drop another notice in my mailbox. "Failure to comply will result in forfeiture of property." I wanted to laugh in her face. Forfeiture? Who even writes that? But instead, I did what the FBI told me to. I played the part. Head down, silent, beaten. All while, behind the scenes, agents were crawling through my property at night, planting cameras and recorders. Mr. Peterson's garage became their command post. His quiet, dusty workbench now hosted laptops, antennas, and live feeds of Denise's every move. And oh, she gave them plenty. Within days, the cameras caught late-night gatherings at her house. Not just neighbors, but men in suits I'd never seen before. People sliding envelopes across the table. People pointing at maps and property records. One night, an inspector I recognized from City Hall showed up. He left with a fat envelope tucked into his jacket. Another night, her brother, the fire chief, arrived. They laughed, clinked glasses, and toasted like they'd won something. Every frame, every word was being logged. Meanwhile, Denise didn't slow down her harassment. She started dropping flyers on porches, calling me a danger to the neighborhood, claimed my cabin burned because I was careless, that I put everyone at risk. Some neighbors believed her. Others stayed silent. But the tide was turning. I could feel it. Still, Denise acted untouchable. She strutted through the block with her little dog, shouting across yards about new HOA initiatives and upcoming development plans, like she was the mayor of some kingdom she built out of lies. But what she didn't know, every word was being recorded. Every lie, every scheme, every fake fine. Then one Friday evening, a black SUV pulled into her driveway. A man in a suit stepped out, briefcase in hand. He wasn't from around here. I'd have bet money on it. Peterson and I watched the feed from his garage. The man handed Denise the briefcase. She opened it, and even on the grainy camera, the stacks of cash were clear. The FBI agents looked at each other and nodded. "We've got her," one said. The next day, Denise called for an emergency HOA meeting. Every neighbor was invited. Flyers were taped to doors. The bold print read, "Final decision on community redevelopment." I knew what it really was, her last push. Her final move to grab everything, but she didn't know the FBI had decided to make it her downfall. Because when that meeting started, it wasn't just neighbors walking into her garage. It was federal agents, ready to tear her empire apart in front of everyone. Friday evening came fast, too fast. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees, Denise's garage was already buzzing with people. Cars lined the street. Neighbors who had avoided me for months strolled in with clipboards and lawn chairs like they were attending a community barbecue. I stood on my porch across the street, hands stuffed in my pockets, playing my role. Head down, silent, the beaten man. But inside I was boiling, because I knew what was about to happen, and so did the FBI. Peterson's garage was alive with monitors and agents whispering into radios. Every angle of Denise's garage was covered, tiny cameras hidden in her hedges, microphones planted under her siding, even a drone circling high above like a hawk. I couldn't see inside from where I stood, but I could hear her voice on the feed. Loud, confident. "Thank you all for coming," she announced. "This is the future of our neighborhood. Tonight we finalize redevelopment plans. Those who don't comply will face legal consequences." Legal consequences. From a woman running a fake HOA out of her garage. Then another voice chimed in. Her brother, the fire chief. He bragged about safety code enforcement and planned demolitions. Every word was another nail in their coffin. The FBI agent beside me muttered, "That's enough." And then it happened. The garage door rolled open, not to reveal Denise's proud little counsel, but to floodlights and agents in tactical vests shouting commands. "FBI! Hands where we can see them!" Chaos erupted. Neighbors gasped, chairs toppled, papers flew. Denise froze mid-sentence, her smile cracking like shattered glass. Her brother went pale, his hand hovering near the door like he was about to bolt. Agents swarmed. They grabbed the fire chief, slapped cuffs on the inspector who tried to slip out the back, seized the briefcase still sitting on Denise's workbench. For a moment, the whole street was frozen, neighbors lining the sidewalks, mouths open, watching everything unfold like a movie. And then they turned to me. I'll never forget those looks. People who had glared at me for months, people who whispered behind blinds, now staring wide-eyed with guilt and shame, realizing they'd believed the wrong person, followed the wrong leader. Denise's face twisted. She thrashed as two agents pulled her hands behind her back. "This is illegal!" she shrieked. "I'm the HOA president. You can't do this to me!" The agent hauling her out barked back. "There is no HOA. You made it up." Her eyes locked on me across the street. Pure venom. "You think you've won?" She spat, her voice cracking. "This isn't over!" But her hands were in cuffs. Her little empire, her fake rules, her fake fines, her fire-setting intimidation was collapsing in front of the very people she'd brainwashed. Neighbors whispered furiously, "She lied to us. She forged my violation notice. She told me he was dangerous." The truth was unraveling in real time. And then, as the agents loaded boxes of evidence into vans, the sheriff himself stepped forward. He looked at Denise, then at me. "You'll want to be in court for this one," he said. "Trust me." For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift off my chest. Not completely, not yet, but enough to breathe again. As the FBI convoy rolled away, neighbors scattered back to their homes in silence. Some wouldn't meet my eyes. Others gave the smallest nods, ashamed. Peterson walked up beside me, his face lined but proud. "Told you," he said softly. "She wasn't working alone." I nodded. "No, but now she's finally cornered." What Denise didn't know, what no one knew, was that this story wasn't going to end in her garage. It was going to end in a courtroom, And when she walked in thinking it was just another civil case, she had no idea who she'd be facing on the bench. The raid had taken Denise's empire apart piece by piece, but there was still one final step. Court. The weeks leading up to the trial were tense. Rumors flew around the neighborhood. Some said Denise had cut a deal. Others swore she'd walk free because of her brother's connections. People stopped me at the store, whispering apologies for believing her lies, asking if I thought she'd get what she deserved. I just gave the same answer every time. We'll see. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in silence. My black robe hung neatly pressed on the back of my closet door. My bench awaited me, not as a victim, not as a neighbor, but as what I had always been, something Denise never bothered to find out, a federal judge. When I entered the courthouse, staff greeted me as usual, but today felt different. The case wasn't just another file on my docket. This one was personal. I sat at the bench, the room buzzing as lawyers shuffled papers and observers whispered. Then the bailiff's voice cut through the noise. "All rise!" The door creaked open and Denise walked in. Her hair was unkempt, her flashy clothes swapped for an orange jumpsuit. Her sunglasses, those ridiculous oversized sunglasses she wore like a crown, were gone. She looked smaller, diminished, but when her eyes lifted and landed on me, her mouth fell open. The color drained from her face. She gripped the table for balance like the floor had just dropped out from under her. "You," she whispered, voice barely audible. "No." "No, this isn't possible." It was. The same neighbor she'd harassed, threatened, and burned out of his cabin was now the man deciding her fate. I kept my expression neutral, professional. But inside, it was the sweetest justice I'd ever tasted. The prosecution laid it all out. Arson, fraud, forgery, racketeering. Every fake violation, every bribe, every late-night meeting caught on tape. Peterson even testified, voice steady as he confirmed everything he'd seen in her garage. Denise tried to fight. She yelled, cried, claimed it was all lies, that she was the real victim, that the HOA had been misunderstood. But every time she spoke, another piece of evidence undercut her. The final blow came when the FBI agent played back audio from that last garage meeting. Denise's voice clear as day. "If he won't comply, we'll burn him out like the rest." The courtroom went dead silent. Denise broke. She dropped her head into her hands and sobbed, shoulders shaking. The same woman who had strutted around the neighborhood like a queen was now reduced to tears in front of everyone. When it was time to deliver judgment, I looked her dead in the eye. "For months, you terrorized your neighbors. You built an empire on lies, fear, and intimidation. You thought no one could stop you, but justice has a way of catching up to people like you." Her lip quivered. Tears streaked her cheeks. She shook her head like a child caught in a lie. "This court finds you guilty on all charges," I declared. The gavel struck like thunder. The sound echoed in the chamber. Final and absolute. As she was led away in cuffs, she turned back one last time, her face a mask of disbelief. She wasn't the ruler of the neighborhood anymore. She wasn't the HOA president of anything. She was just another criminal finally facing consequences. When I stepped outside that day, the air felt lighter. Neighbors gathered on the courthouse steps. Some clapped. Others shook my hand. Peterson even patted me on the back and whispered, "You saved us." But I knew the truth. I hadn't just saved myself or my neighbors. I had reminded Denise, and anyone like her, that no one is above the law, not even an HOA Karen. So tell me this. What would you have done if your neighbor tried to burn down your home just to steal your land? Would you have fought back the same way or walked away? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm reading every single one. And if you love seeing karma catch up with people like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more unbelievable HOA stories.